Okay, it's 4 o'clock. I'll call the December 19th meeting to order. Dean, could we have roll call? Or, I'm sorry, first, confirm the packet has been posted. I'm sorry, Margie?
You're fine. I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice was provided.
Okay, thank you, Margie, and by the way, thank you for all you do. Dean, could we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Vancouver.
Here.
Commissioner Sidell.
Here.
Commissioner Alt.
Here.
Commissioner Farber.
Here.
Commissioner Mike Sell.
You're muted there, Patrick.
Commissioner Mike Sell. Unmuted. He's there. Acting Chair Waters.
Here?
So we have 7 members at this time, and we have 5 members physically here, and Mr. Mike Sell joining us via Zoom, so that constitutes a quorum, and so we can conduct today's business.
Thank you, Dean. Are there any corrections or edits to the minutes of the December 5th meeting? Hearing none, could I, excuse me, get an approval?
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to approve the minutes of the December 5th meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. We'll move into new business. And Dean, administrative items?
Administrative items, this is not a public hearing item. This is a follow-up to a rezoning case that you heard earlier in 2023. And this is an application requesting approval of a final site development plan for a proposed utility company service and maintenance facility that wishes to locate in the former Harley-Davidson dealership building. And that property is located in the North Ohio Gateway Overlay District. The property is Lot 1, Block 1 of the ADR addition, and the address of this building and property is 2200 North Ohio Street. Mr. Aiken's going to give you a staff report and overview, and then I'm going to talk specifically about existing and proposed front yard landscaping. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Aiken.
Thank you for the introduction, Dean. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So, as Dean said, we have a request filed here by Ann File on behalf of the Salina Health Education Foundation requesting approval of a final site development plan for a proposed utility company service and maintenance facility in the former Harley-Davidson dealership building on the east side of Ohio Street, south of the I-70, and it's addressed as 2200 North Ohio Street. The subject property here, Lot 1 for this final development plan, is 4.3 acres and is zoned I-2. So in May of this year, the Salina Health Education Foundation filed an application to rezone this property to I-2, as well as an application for the final plat of the ADR addition, which were both heard and approved by the Planning Commission in June of this year, and were later approved by the City Commission in July. Both the plat and rezoning to I-2 were approved, and the rezoning was made subject to the following 2 conditions. First, a site development plan for this 8.96 acre site shall be submitted to and approved by the Planning Commission prior to issuance of any building permits or change of occupancy, which is required under Section 420.7 of the Salina City Code, which brings us here before you all today. And also a final plat shall be approved prior to final zoning approval of the site. So the Salina Health Education Foundation purchased the 8.96 acre former Harley-Davidson dealership site on North Ohio Street, which is now platted as the ADR addition. An undisclosed utility company has a contract to purchase this property from the Salina Health Education Foundation to use the site for vehicle parking and outdoor storage. The utility company is not proposing any changes to the footprint of the existing Harley-Davidson building, just interior alterations. The provided floor plan shows that offices, meeting rooms, office cubicles, a storage room, a practice room, a welding shop, and vehicle bays are being proposed for this project, and no public street extension into the site is being proposed, but there are two 30-foot wide driveway curb cuts at the north and south end of the site. So in terms of the proposed final site development plan adhering to I-2 zoning, the proposed contractor storage yard and office use, which is what this utility company is proposing, is a permitted use in the I-2 zone. I am going to greatly summarize their I-2 standards here. The proposed final site development plan meets all the I-2 bulk regulations, which are things like setbacks, lot coverage, lot width, depth, and things like that. In terms of parking, this facility would have a maximum of 20 on-site employees, and no outside customers are going to be accessing this private facility. The proposed site development plan shows that 30 parking spaces are being proposed and 4 loading spaces are being proposed. And additionally, the applicant is proposing kind of an array of uses that don't readily fall into a off-street parking calculation. However, because this is a private facility that would only have on-site employees and would not be accessible to the public, the zoning administrators determined that the 30 parking spaces would suffice for this development, which is allowed under section 425532L of the Salina City Code, which does allow for a reduction in parking when a floor plan or operating characteristics of a facility show that standard parking regulations would kind of result in an excessive amount of surplus parking. It doesn't appear that signage is being proposed at this time. And lastly, in terms of landscaping, it's not required in the I-2 zoning district, but is required in the North Ohio Overlay District, and we'll discuss that in greater depth in just a moment. So the intent of the North Ohio Overlay District is intended to protect and enhance the aesthetic and visual character of the North Ohio Gateway into the city from the interstate. In accordance with the City Commission's strategic goal of encouraging quality, market-driven, mixed-use development, the Overlay District is intended to ensure that land development adjacent to North Ohio Street occurs in a manner that overall improves the appearance of major entryways into the city. So the Overlay District regulations supersede the regulations of the underlying zoning district, where the underlying district regulations are in conflict with the underlying with the provisions of the Overlay District. So some examples of that where the overlay requirements would supersede I-2 zoning would be things like parking lot and driveway paving, front yard landscaping, outdoor storage, outdoor display, and exterior building materials. In terms of the lot size, building setbacks, height, and lot coverage in the North Ohio Overlay District, this proposed site development plan meets all the requirements of the Overlay District. And in terms of the development standards of the Overlay District, this site development plan meets the off-street parking, surfacing, and loading space standards. In terms of outdoor storage and display, the provided site plan doesn't show outdoor storage being proposed between the front of the building and North Ohio Street, but rather it'd be behind the building, as you can see there, which would adhere to the overlay requirements. In the Overlay District, outdoor storage in the side and rear yards must be screened from public streets and adjoining property by a solid wall, fence, or densely planted hedge not less than 6 feet in height. And their submitted site plan shows they're proposing a 6-foot-tall chain link fence with barbed wire in the rear of the property to the north, south, and east of the existing building. However, the applicant is requesting relief from the requirement that the rear outdoor storage area be screened based on their physical security standards and the distance of the stored materials from Ohio Street, which is approximately 356 feet from the building. In terms of landscaping in the overlay district, I'm going to hand it off to Dean for a bit to discuss that in greater depth. So,
I think, Dustin, you may have the original plan. So one thing we wanted to clarify is that when Harley-Davidson located and built their building here, this property was zoned C7, Highway Commercial, and the overlay, North Ohio Overlay District did not exist. And so there was a requirement when Harley-Davidson's facility went in that they provide front yard landscaping. And their plan that was implemented at that time consisted of 8 ornamental trees and 5 shade trees. Of those 5 shade trees, 2 are missing and 3 are present on the south portion of the property. But based on the plan that's been submitted, that is where a proposed driveway is going, so those 3 mature trees would be removed. And so in terms of green space, they don't need to make any alteration to the green space that already exists. And so if you visualize, you have an area of green space there that's like the roadside ditch, that's right-of-way, and then there's a buffer strip that's on their own property that already is landscaped, and that dates back from the Harley-Davidson facility. So from our standpoint, the plan that is in place today is compliant, but it is lacking 2 shade trees that would need to be replaced, and it's going to end up with 5 shade trees needing to be replaced because our understanding is that they're proposing to remove those trees. Obviously, relocation, you can relocate mature trees. It's challenging, but their options would be to either relocate or replace those trees. So in terms of, we had a correction that needs to be made on page 11 of your report. We overstated the property frontage and we overstated the front yard landscape requirement. It's not 620 feet and it's not 12,400 square feet, and that was called out by the project architect. The requirement is actually half that, 6,200 square feet has been provided, and that meets the requirement. And so from a landscaping standpoint, they did not submit any kind of proposed plan other than to show a driveway where those 3 trees are to the south. And so their options would be to restore the original Harley-Davidson plan or submit an alternate plan. But where we end up is we have the original ornamental trees, but they're down 5 shade trees from the original plan, and so that's what they would need to address. And your options would be to address that today or defer that review to the building permit stage. But we did want to share with the commission that there was an original plan when Harley-Davidson went in there, and what you see there today is the remnants of that original plan. The other thing I would call your attention to, it's right after the application page, and we have blown it up so that it is large enough for the commission to read, but it's entitled ADR Edition Variance Requests, and it highlights 3 things that they're requesting, what they say they're requesting relief from the Planning Commission. One is for required amount of off-street parking. That doesn't require any relief from the Planning Commission's part because we've already determined that 30 spaces is adequate to meet their needs. The second thing they're requesting is a variance to the requirement of the construction of a sidewalk at the west property line of the property. That is not something that the Planning Commission is in a position to grant relief from. However, I can report to the Planning Commission that at your December 5th meeting, you made a recommendation that the City Commission be given additional discretion to not require sidewalks as part of immediate development in cases such as this that are somewhat remote from the built-up city, and that your recommendation was approved last night by the City Commission. So what that means is that this is not a matter for your review or discussion this evening, but that the correct course of action would be for the property owners to ask the City Commission to approve an amended development agreement that addresses the sidewalk differently. I did want to point out that your recommendation was to allow that discretion in all subdivisions, and the City Commission recommended that it only be available in non-residential subdivisions, which this is. And then I wanted to call your attention to the very lengthy justification that the applicant is providing for not having, or should not have to screen the rear storage area that's shown on their site plan. And so they have very specific security standards from their standpoint, and that is durable chain link with barbed wire at the top, and they are requesting that the Planning Commission allow that. The only place where, based on the overlay district and the city code, they would need to screen would be on the north side of their outdoor storage area, because the Flying J property is zoned commercial. That would normally have to have site obscuring screening to screen it from Flying J, but they're asking you to approve their fencing plan, which is barbed wire with chain link. So I've interrupted Mr. Aiken, but he will, he'll come back to you and just talk about, I do want, and we may have skipped over, Mr. Hers, could you, I think it's talked about under the staff comments and analysis.
Oh, it's good.
Could you talk, what's that?
Oh, I was almost there.
Okay. I was gonna have Mr. Hers talk about their building,
That's fine.
the building elevations.
Sure. So the existing building has a few different types of materials that were used when the building was constructed. Because this property is in the North Ohio Overlay District, we do look at the exterior design and the materials that are being used on the building. Typically, the Planning Commission wouldn't necessarily review materials of a property, but because it's in the overlay district, it is one of the criteria that you are to consider. And what is discouraged in the North Ohio Overlay District are materials like vertical metal siding and things of that nature. And what is encouraged is masonry and stucco-like materials. And so the west elevation, which is what we have on the screen where my cursor is the elevation that faces Ohio, and it consists of masonry split block and ephes, which is a stucco-like material that has kind of a texture to it and can then be painted. And so the west elevation as well as the north elevation are primarily that split block and ephes. There are some columns with a small canopy that are dressing up the entrance into the building. And then the south elevation, east elevation have the vertical metal siding, but those are the sides that do not face North Ohio. And the criteria is that you have your primary frontage, in this case would be the North Ohio frontage, the west frontage, consisting of masonry or stucco materials, and then 20% of the other sides being that masonry or stucco materials as well. The west and south sides don't have anything other than vertical metal siding. However, the north side is about 2/3 stucco and that split face block masonry. So in total, it appears to staff that even though this particular property was constructed prior to the overlay district being created, it does meet the requirements that a new building would have to meet if it were in the North Ohio overlay district.
So I'll pick things up and finish things off. So the Planning Commission's role here is to determine whether the applicant's plan for converting this building to a contractor's facility and maintenance yard is of sufficient quality as to site design, building materials, and appearance to meet the development standards of the North Ohio Gateway Overlay District. So with that, it appears the Commission has the following alternatives. They could recommend approval of the applicant's request. They could recommend approval of the applicant's request with any conditions deemed appropriate by the Planning Commission. They could recommend consideration be postponed to a future meeting date to allow the applicant or staff to provide more information about this request. Or the Planning Commission could recommend denial of this proposed site development plan, provided adequate findings can be made. Staff has identified 3 deficiencies with the applicant's submittal. Do we have this now?
Well, yeah, we just received an updated drainage study, but it has not been reviewed by anyone. But the original study that was done didn't take into account the rear yard storage area in terms of site runoff. So your options would be you could postpone consideration of this to allow that to be reviewed and presented to you, or you could defer the drainage study review to the building permit submittal. We did not get a plan for replacing existing dead or missing landscaping or for replacing the 3 trees that would be removed as part of the driveway plan. So again, your options would be to postpone consideration this afternoon to allow that to be submitted, or you could defer the submittal of a landscape replacement plan to allow staff to review as part of the building permit submittal. And then probably the most important piece for the commission to decide is there's no plan presented for site obscuring screening for the rear storage area. And you could either postpone consideration today to allow a revised fencing plan to be submitted, or you could decide that an exception should be granted to the screening requirement based on the location of the outdoor storage and its distance from Ohio Street. So if you were to act on this afternoon, we have identified on page 16 and 17 a number of conditions of approval. And so I think the most important thing is, do you feel comfortable postponing and allowing staff to review the drainage as part of the building permit, allowing staff to review the landscaping as part of the building permit, and do you think the applicant has made a sufficient justification for not screening that rear area? And I do, Dustin may be able to pull it up on an aerial photo, but I am pretty certain that the Planning Commission approved an outdoor storage area for Foley equipment across the street that is not physically screened. So they have an area back there, and that is not, they do not have site obscuring screening around that. It's not really readily visible from Ohio Street, and they do have some landscaping on I-70, so that is not enclosed by site obscuring screening. So in terms of precedent, it's already been allowed at Foley equipment across the street. So with that, everyone on planning staff has had some role in reviewing these plans, and staff would be open to any questions you have before you hear from the applicant.
Okay, thank you, staff, for the presentation. Are there any questions of the staff?
Can we pull up a aerial, I guess I'm trying to look at the area between Flying J, trying to see that screening area there in the back. And the proposed storage area would be in that back quadrant, right? Correct.
It'd be in that area back behind the paved apron there, from there to the back property line. So that's the proposed fenced-in material storage yard. And so it would abut the Flying J property where Dustin has his cursor there. And so this is an administrative item, and it's your exercising your judgment on what is needed to meet the intent of the North Ohio Gateway Overlay District. So you have the discretion to say that you think that the plan that they have for barbed wire and chain link fence is should be approved based on its location and its remoteness from Ohio Street. As we noted, they're not proposing any storage in the side yard or in the front between the building and street.
I guess I have one question. Why is this, the entity isn't identified? It is right here. Or did I miss something? I thought I...
We're not in a position to identify the entity. They've identified themselves on their variance request, but if the applicant wants to reveal the identity, they can, but staff has been asked not to, so.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Okay, would the applicant like to present? Oh, yes, Pat.
Would it physically be possible to move that south driveway enough to miss those trees?
It probably
And I'll ask the
would
same
not,
question
from the
of-
standpoint of they're trying to get all their development onto Lot 1, which is what they're purchasing, and so to have the driveway be located on Lot 1, that's where the driveway would need to be.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Would the applicant like to speak?
Good afternoon. My name's Charles Renz with Jones Gillum Renz Architects. I'm the architect for this development. I will clarify that at the time we started conversations with the city on this, the future occupant had not been determined, it had been determined, it had not been disclosed. It is One Gas, Kansas Gas, that is looking at relocating in this facility. Based on your conversations prior to the meeting, I think that was out there, so no secrets disclosed or anything. I would like to just kind of go through the nature of our request, some of the items that Dean touched on. One had to do with the missing landscaping, or the landscaping that would be displaced. It would be our intention to anything that we displace that we would look to replace. There was mention made now we may not be able to replace those with mature trees, but as far as the three trees that would be displaced by the drive, if we can make adjustments to that, we can, to retain a tree or two, but based on the traffic flow that needs to happen through there, that'd be difficult. The two trees to the north, we are not proposing any site changes that would affect those trees. If you could call up the site plan, I would just clarify, or the development plan as far as that traffic flow. Oh, thank you, Dean. The traffic flow intended for the facility is for the main entrance of Kansas Gas vehicles to be at this north approach. We have a secure gate back in this area. Security is highly critical to Kansas Gas. with the nature of what they do and the services that they provide on an emergency basis. The security is critical. So the traffic flow through the building would be here. In this vehicle bay that we identify, the intent is to be able to park some vehicles and trailers that are required for, to be able to, to be conditioned, ready to go. They can be set up. So, in an emergency situation, they're prepared to exit the building. That is why we've put the drive where we have. Those include pretty large vehicles with a large trailer. I believe the total length of that vehicle with trailer is like 66 feet. So the turning radius out of there, is critical for us to get out of the facility. And that is at the existing overhead door location. We are replacing the overhead doors. The overall building, there's really no modification to the existing building in terms of the finishes other than painting of the orange stripe, cleaning of the building, some touch-up is necessary for it to be nice looking, to be a nice looking facility, getting rid of the orange stripe and just going back with something more neutral. And again, the driveway through here is just for, again, the other vehicles that are not, that are not parked back in here within the vehicle bay, having access, through this drive here. Again, we have another secure point through here. So with a automatic gate that would allow traffic out of the site right there. We talk about that back storage area. If you go back to that area right there, at this point, the extent of that is a little bit unknown as far as how far we take the gravel, how far we take the fence. Some of that may be budget related, but we are working through on the exact equipment that will be located back here. This we feel is a worst case that we would take that. Now, what is critical is that the entire site be secure. So again, security fencing will go around the building, but the extent of that could be altered a little bit. As far as the drainage report, that a drainage report has been resubmitted, and that is based on our designs to this point. For your information in terms of the project schedule, we would be looking at getting this out to bid, out on the streets, under construction, shortly after the first of the year. So probably, at some point in January, we would like to be ready to go with everything. So we're in the process of design review with Kansas Gas. So building-wise, things are pretty straight. I mean, what we show, it's all pretty straightforward. But again, there may be some minor decisions that, could be budget related to, what the job allows. Let's see. We talked then I will back up. I apologize on the landscaping. We would ask that you allow us to submit a final landscape plan, as part of the permit process. That's the way, we customarily do it with, on most projects. So we don't have any issue with that. And same thing with the final drainage plan. I do have Matt Rao from Caw Valley Engineering who has prepared the drainage plan. And so if there are any questions about that, he can address those. Then as far as the site fencing, if we look at that, if maybe we go back to the aerial photograph that kind of showed that entire area. As Dean stated, there is precedent with storage area over here at Foley, outdoor storage area that is chain link. It's undisclosed. We think our situation is a little bit different than that, in that we really are looking at storage that's really has minimal extension beyond the sides of our building, versus out here there's this it really extends to the south pretty significantly from the building. So in terms of that visibility from Ohio, we feel like that is minimized. And Mr. Farber asked, I think, about just kind of the parking lot, or kind of this north side over here, and what exists over there. Currently, there's no site obscuring, fence along this. We're proposing to not have site obscuring fence. This area back here, this is the diesel truck filling station over here. So the distance from the property line, and I don't know, can you extend that any further south to get a little bit more of the, no, I'm sorry, north. There we go. Yeah. Nearest area of building back here, again, that's, over 300 feet back to the nearest area of the building, back to where they have, chain link fence around their equipment pads and that type of thing. So again, this is all parking, semi-truck parking. If I can talk a little bit about the site fencing and the need for security, obviously they want to protect their interests. Their interests are critical in an emergency, that they have equipment or they have materials that are accessible and can be, that are readily available for their work, for emergency situations. The fence requirements and their justification for the type of fence they have and what they want to do, it's identified in the packet of information that staff went over. But I did want to point out that part of that security, part of the rationale for not having that totally screened is just some of that visibility through there. Again, it's a long ways away. It's a long ways away from the street and from having really any impact on the public. But knowing that somebody can be seen back there is a deterrent to, somebody going back there and messing around and stealing stuff, because they are not completely, they are somewhat open. So there is that. We think that is still, is an effective deterrent to that. Again, the other thing back in that fenced area that Kansas Gas, would like to make sure that, we are clear on is, it is in their best interest to keep a neat and orderly site. If you look at other facilities that they have around the area in Manhattan, they do keep a pretty neat and orderly site. That's for access around the site, but also safety to their workers and those types of things. So it is not intended to be used as a junkyard, as a collection for all things. It is intended to be a neatly stored space where they can, readily access in a safe way the materials that they need. Let's see. There was mention in the staff report as far as the staff recommendation about trash enclosures, trash receptacles. It is our intent, and it's shown on the development plan, that to locate trash back in the area back behind the building where it would be obscured by the building. If there is a need to screen a portion of that, then, I don't think that will be a major issue. Again, we want it to be nice, but the intent is to, upon final layout of that, that site, just with the building to provide the necessary screening for the dumpster. No signage proposed at this time. We anticipate that at some point there will be a sign out there that we will go through a building sign. We'll go through the sign permit process to address that. It talks about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, so do you basically agree with these 10 proposals except number 3 with the sign or the screened
Yeah, I don't think we have any issues with those. That is the main piece. We had made request to not have to do the sidewalk, but with the recent activity going on, we understand that there's another step in the process. And then with some information we provided regarding the parking, staff was agreeable to the parking count that we had when we talked about the number of people actually in the building. I was going to say that on those first two items, the NOI has been applied for. That is under review by KDHE, along with the application for fill permit from the state for the Division of Water Resources. I do have the civil engineer here, if anybody has any questions for him about the drainage.
Okay, are there any other questions for Charles or for Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the way that the format of the staff report is written, that if you are agreeable to not requiring screening and to allowing the chain link fence, then you would simply delete condition number 3 from any action of approval and just indicate that you're supportive of their fencing plan that was submitted.
Dustin, can you go back to the development plan? And with your mouse, or Charles, either one, outline where the chain link goes, just an outline will follow.
The chain link goes from essentially the west side,
Okay.
front west side of each building, back around to the extent of the secure area that is
Okay.
developed, and then back around at the south side, back to the building.
Okay.
There is no proposal for any signage, or, I'm sorry, any fencing at the front of the building.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions of the applicant?
Thank you for clarifying that, because I was a little confused as to whether it would cut off at just at the turn radius of the vehicles, or if it did actually extend back into that storage area. I guess my only hangup with the fencing as proposed is I don't want to cause detriment to the property to the north, the Flying J. And I appreciate the way Charles explained it with the security and surveillance. I see the necessity of that as well. So that alleviated some of my concerns, and I do appreciate that.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, I bring it back to the commission for discussion or a motion.
I would move that we approve application Z 23-2A with the exception, with all of the items recommended by the staff, those 10 items except number 3.
Do I hear a second on that?
I'd second that.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to approve application Z 23-2A with the conditions listed on page 16 and 17, 1 through 10, excluding number 3. All in favor?
Madam Chair.
Yes?
Would this be inclusive, as Dean was mentioning, of pushing this approval of landscaping and drainage to the building permit phase as opposed to us handling it right now?
Yes.
Was that? is
That's
that
the way
okay?
we were interpreting the motion, yes.
Yes.
Thank you for clarity.
Okay, it has been moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Pat. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, as I mentioned last night, the city commission approved the annexation of the property out on West Magnolia Road, and they approved an amendment to the subdivision regulations that would allow the Beck's property across the street, this property, and the Augustine property on South 9th to come back and amend their development agreements to defer the construction of sidewalks. And so that went into effect last night. There are just a couple other things. They don't directly affect the planning commission, but just from the way things have been done in the past are fairly big changes. One, the city commission voted to meet twice a month, the same as the planning commission does. So they will, instead of meeting 4 times a month, they will meet twice a month. Another change that they made was historically in the past, the city commission has had 2 readings on an ordinance that they adopt. And so they have, the state law allows them to do it in a single passage, and they have done that. The other thing that changed was that when we do a notice of a public hearing for the Planning Commission today, for better or worse, we publish that in the Salina Journal. And starting January 1st, all public hearing notices will be published on the city's website instead of in the newspaper. So those are all things that don't directly affect the Planning Commission, but they are things that affect the cases and applications that you work on. So it will change some of the scheduling and workflow in terms of Planning Commission recommendations getting to the City Commission. It will, instead of having 2 readings to change the zoning of a property, there's a single reading. And then don't be scanning the Salina Journal classified section for public hearing notices, because you won't find them. And we will not have a meeting on January 2nd, but we will meet on the 16th of January.
Very good.
And I think that's all the business we have for you this year. Mr. Ivy had a conflict that came up, and so he was not able to attend his final meeting, but he will be seated on the City Commission in the 8th of January, which means he'll come off of this commission. And we will then be down to 6 members, and we'll be looking to get some additional expressions of interest to serve on the Planning Commission. So,
Okay. Thank you for the update, Dean. Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
Moved and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Merry Christmas, everybody.